know I said Pizzeria Simulator would be my next video after Sister Location, but things came up and I got a little distracted, so we have this in the meantime. While it's pretty obvious I'm a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan, beyond that, I'm also just a big horror fan. I enjoy horror games, but I also absolutely love horror movies. So when it was announced 3 years ago that Markiplier was making an Iron Lung movie, I was so excited. So of course, when it came out on January 30th, my brother and I were there opening night, and it was great. I loved the movie, even if I didn't really understand what was happening. I never actually played the original game or even saw anything on it, and when the movie was announced, I just figured I'd wait instead. And when it finally released on YouTube, I bought it immediately, watched through it 2 more times, this time with subtitles, and I realized I want to build this in Minecraft. But for this build, since it was a little more spontaneous, I didn't plan the whole thing out like I normally do, and I kinda just went for it. Though even with the movie readily available, it still wasn't that easy, and I ended up mostly using behind the scenes pictures. That being said, I still think it came out really well and is honestly one of my best builds I've done, despite it being on a much smaller scale. Where previous Chisels and Bits builds took between 30 and 70 hours, this one only took about 13. The biggest issue with this build, which I ran into almost immediately, was the block palette. It was kinda difficult to distinguish what was lighting and what was the actual color of the submarine in the movie. Even the set photos I used had largely the same lighting, which only made it more confusing. While making it, my mind kept racing about all the different things I could add to make the build even bigger and make it take a little longer, but I did have to hone myself back in and remember that this one's just really for fun. Well, they're all for fun, but it was just meant to fill in the gap, and it just seemed like something that'd be interesting to do in a short period of time. So while I did originally plan to build the crawl space underneath and the games version of the SM13, in the end I chose not to. After all, I didn't want to put off Pizzeria Simulator any longer. For the walls of the submarine, I decided to keep the block palette fairly simple, polished andesite for anywhere where it wasn't rusted and anywhere where it was exposed copper, since the 2 blocks have similar textures. But I realized that it didn't look that great, so I used brown mushroom in between them to blend it and make it look a little better. A lot of time was spent on the rust, but I think it came out well and gets the point across pretty good. But I guess you'll have to let me know what you think. By this point, I was also more experienced with the Axiom mod, so I made use of display entities more often. But I still tried to stick to Chisels and Bits for the most part where I thought it looked good-ish. For the most part, I usually always try to use bits to make stuff, but if it just doesn't look like it's gonna fit well or isn't gonna look good, I'll use display entities. The only real exception to this with this build, in my opinion, is the speaker intercom, which I chose to do with bits instead because I thought it looked fine and it was mostly a challenge to myself. And I'm still on the rust. Okay, so this video is actually sped up about 32 times the in-game speed, just to give you an idea of how long this would actually be if I did not speed it up. But the time commitment isn't really that bad. I usually just put on a playlist and get my reference pictures and then get to work on it for hours at a time. If you're someone who enjoys the small details like me, it can be a lot of fun, but if you don't, it can be torturous. The control console in the front is one of the situations where I tried to use bits to make it to the best of my ability, but ended up just using display entities for a few of the details because it just looked better. One thing I always have difficulty with in these builds is angled surfaces, such as this console. They make things difficult, it can be a bit harder to understand where things are placed and get them situated properly. but I always enjoy the challenge of them, so it's not that bad. Right now I'm building the porthole window, which I originally considered leaving open with maybe some red on the other side to look like the blood ocean, but since it's closed for the majority of the movie and game, I decided to leave it closed as well. I also cycled through a variety of block options because Minecraft isn't the best game when it comes to blocks that are similar but maybe a little darker, so it can be a little difficult sometimes to find what looks right. For the details of the console, I ended up having to shift them around a lot and even changing the size of it itself. But that is one of the nice things about Chisels and Bits, it is very easy to make changes when needed. The one detail that I knew from the beginning would have to be done with displays was the text. Anytime there's text, it almost always has to be done with text displays, unless there's enough space to use bits, but in this case there definitely was not. So I used them for both coordinates, which I entirely made up, as well as the angle, but for that I had to add a display entity underneath so it would actually sit flush. And because I've been a longtime Markiplier fan, I had to add the reference that we were all thinking of.
Was that the bite of 87?
Moving on, I added more details to the console, such as the needle and the compass, all the buttons and the two center parts, and I used more display entities for anything else that I needed, like the, control for the movement, which I used a fence for. I thought that worked pretty well. Then I added in the depth and oxygen meters on either side of the porthole window using text displays to get the needed text, as well as the three little gauge things across the console, and finished off with the light on top. It was also around this time that I realized the base cylinder of the ship was off, but it was way too late to fix that, so I just did my best and adjusted accordingly. I ended up choosing to make the camera's screen as well as some of the other things in the ship with the mushroom blocks rather than the oxidized copper, just to make them stand out and not blend in so much. So when I needed to add rust to those, I ended up using brown concrete powder, which was just about the best I could find. You can see a small slit missing on the side of the ship, but this is just a weird product of using Chisels and Bits with the replay mod. There's not really a solution for it, it just kinda happens. The other main issue with using these mods together is that since the blocks do have to load in, this goes for the recording as well, which means there's about 20 seconds at the beginning of every recording that I have to cut out where I just give it time to load. At this point, I added in all the valves and then quickly moved on to the intercom speaker, which, like I said earlier, I chose to do with bits, and you can tell me how it looks. After that, I added the chair, which you can sit on if you interact with it with right click. Then I moved to the back of the submarine to add the other appliances, such as the camera, which I think actually has the most display entities of the entire build. Like with the console, I did try to build it with bits originally, but it didn't look that great, and honestly it didn't look like the scale was gonna work, so I redid it with displays. This also meant that I could add the needles to all of them and turn them in the directions that they were in the movie, which was a fun detail. I also added in the camera button with displays because with bits the scale just would not have worked at all, and then I added the pipes to finish that part. With that done, I added some more texture to the screen before adding in the actual screen itself, which is just black concrete, and then moved on to the computer. Adding the computer was easy, as it was fairly similar to the arcades I've built for past builds. And I chose to use displays for the screen to not only make it a little thinner, but also get the layered look of the glass in front of the green. All I had left to do was add the keyboard, mouse, and the little hatch on the ground, and then it's time for the showcase. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the flip side.